This is Raymond Alikpala, the author of God and Men by Maverick House Publishers. I'll read from you from chapter 5 of my book entitled First Love, about my high school crush. He was not exactly the campus heartthrob. He was not tall and not fair-complexioned. He was not a varsity athlete or basketball hunk. But James had a smile that could light up a room, and his eyes sparkled. He was intelligent, articulate, and had a warm, engaging manner about him. Other boys seemed naturally drawn to him as well, not just me. Everybody seemed to just want to be his friend. From the first moment I saw him, I felt attracted to James and wanted to be his friend. He was also good looking and had a good physique, but that was not the reason why I was attracted to him, or so I believed. I thought that my attraction to him was completely innocent, in the same way that little boys would choose other boys in the playground to be friends with. I wrote in my diary that James arouses all the brotherly instincts in me. He seems to be so innocent and gentle and kind that I'd really want to take care of him. From my 7 March 1983 entry. However, I also sensed early on that my attraction to James was partly physical. Soon after we first met, I saw him playing football, shirts versus skins, and he was on the skin side. I could not help but admire his lean, muscular upper body. Still, in my mind, I told myself that there was nothing queer about our friendship. It was just a male bonding thing, and I simply wanted to make James my best friend. That James was not an obvious dreamboat helped to convince me that my intentions were innocent. He was often teased about his height, and a few guys called him Frodo. He was even a bit of a nerd, which is why he hung around with me, and because we both liked talking about schoolwork. Both of us were bookworms, talking about the latest novels we had read. He got me to read that memorable rabbit epic, Watership Down. We also fancied ourselves good writers and dreamed about writing our own books someday. He made me promise that I would mention him in my book. I told him that he would get a whole chapter. As James and I got to know each other, I realized for the first time how the presence of one person could make me positively giddy with happiness. I felt for him feelings that I thought I should be feeling toward my own brother, but never did. I just wanted to see him and be around him all the time. My eyes always darted to the corridor where his classroom was, hoping to catch a glimpse of him. Then, seeing him, I would pretend to be going nowhere and amble casually in his direction. James would see me and say hello, and I would feign surprise and pretend I had not noticed him. Even a brief exchange with James would be enough to make my day, to be savored over and over again in my solitude. When we had our walks at the end of the school day, our walk talks, and we would be with a large group of other students walking to the bus stop, I would always maneuver my way steadily through the crowd to be the one to walk right beside James. As we talked about our day, I would saunter beside him and try to match his stride, my left foot to his left foot, my right to his right. And I would imagine that our hearts were also beating in unison. I would feel this strong urge to put my arm around his shoulders, which I would try to resist as long as possible. But I could not resist for long, and I would casually place my arm across his manly shoulders, and I would feel an electric connection between us, as if briefly we became one body. Then, after a while, James would shrug my arm off gently, and I would not resist. We would go our separate ways at the bus stop, and I would head home happily, with a silly song in my heart. And even when we reached home, we would still call each other up on the telephone. I wanted to talk to him all the time just to hear the sound of his voice. We would talk on the phone for hours. This was a time when residences paid a fixed monthly phone rate and were not charged per minute. Our longest phone conversation was in June 1983 from 10:40 p.m. to 2:55 a.m., over 4 hours. The first 6 weeks of my friendship with James were among the happiest in my young life. But I did not really understand why I was so happy. I still was not fully conscious that I was experiencing romantic love for the first time. I knew that I was a man, and James was a man, so it was impossible for me to be falling in love with him. In one letter to James, I wrote in all sincerity, "I remember what our teacher said, and don't worry about anything queer happening. But for you, I am not afraid to show some brotherly affection once in a while, and to use the word love." Entry of September 7th, 1983. In another diary entry, I wrote that what I felt for James was the strongest fraternal love. This was not romantic love, I believed with all my heart, and I was convinced that I was not sexually attracted to James. In fact, he had the opposite effect. I stopped masturbating because of James. I was able to control my sexual urges because I did not want to disappoint him, because for him, I wanted to be a better man. I knew that what I felt for James was powerful, and I felt intensely jealous every time I saw James talking with other friends who I saw as my rivals for his friendship. In my diary, I explained my feelings in this way. I believe I have discovered friendship, and I learned that the word is just a euphemism for love. Love between people of the same gender seems to be unacceptable to some. Friendship is really love. Right now, there isn't yet any special woman in my life, and so I have yet to experience a sexual kind of love. But as far as I'm concerned, this kind of love I've discovered in Cebu, fraternal love, is just as satisfying emotionally. Entry of June 13th, 1983. I was obviously in denial. I knew that James and I could never be lovers, because neither of us was Bakla. So the best that I was hoping for was to be his best friend. Best friend. These two words represented for me, for many years, the highest and deepest aspiration of my soul. I felt lonely and needed a best friend. I knew that my parents were trying their best and that my brother was good to me and had a great bunch of friends at school. Yet the confusion in the core of my being still drove me to seek out another person, someone special, who could somehow ease this loneliness. What exactly I expected from my best friend was not clear to me. I was very close to 3 or 4 classmates, and we could talk to each other about anything. And we were always sleeping over in each other's houses. Yet somehow in my mind, none of them qualified as my best friend. Besides, there should be only one best friend, or so I thought, which is why that friend is the best. I believe that I should be number one for my best friend, and reciprocally, he would be my number one. If I considered him number one, and he considered me only as number 2 or lower, then we were not really best friends. Once I found my best friend, I wanted the rest of the world to recognize us as best friends, to make it official. My best friend and I would always be spending our weekends together, doing fun things like watching movies or going on out-of-town trips. We would be inseparable. Best friend. Meeting James was the very first time that I felt the strong compulsion to tie up my soul, indeed, my whole life, my very existence, exclusively to just one person. I don't know what it is in people that drives us to find one other person to hook up with. Maybe this was sex, or love, or eros, or whatever. I did not really want to know. I was afraid to know. I was afraid to find out that perhaps I was really gay and that I was sexually attracted to James. No, I didn't want to know that. But what I did know was that having a best friend was a normal thing. My mother had her best friend, who was not my father. So your best friend could be a person of the same sex, and that would be all right. I saw my other high school classmates pairing up with each other, becoming best friends, and I felt jealous that I have not succeeded in finding my own best friend. My friendship with James lasted about 6 months. I considered him my best friend, but it was not reciprocated. There were other students that James wanted to be friends with more than me. Still, I believed that I was very special to James for some time. During those 6 months, we seemed to move closer toward each other, and just as suddenly we would move away, as if we felt subconsciously that we should not get too close. We had a few disagreements, which we were able to discuss and settle a few days later. It was always me pursuing James and not the other way. But I knew that James reveled in all the attention I showered upon him. Looking back now, I believe that James was not gay, but he did tell me one evening on the phone that he loved me, a milestone which I recorded ecstatically in my diary. He was a few years younger than me and probably did not imply anything sexual. Even if he did, maybe for him it was really just a temporary phase. It is significant that my friendship with James never turned physical at any point. We never engaged in any sexual conduct. Nothing ever happened between James and me. I did not even conceive of the possibility. While I did feel physically attracted to James and wanted to embrace him and feel his body close to mine, my conscience never let me act on those impulses, which I believed were impure and sinful. The most I ever did was place my arm on his shoulder in a brotherly way. I never tried to feel him or grope him. I repressed all these sexual impulses and concentrated on my love for James, who loved me as an older brother, not as a boyfriend. Then, one Tuesday in November 1983, James told me that he never really loved me, and that he had been good to me only because he had been instructed so by another person. James said that he was there beside me not because he wanted to be, but because that person told him to be, because that person knew that I liked James, and so James should be nice to me. This devastated me, because I thought all along that despite our disagreements, what James and I shared was the real thing. He told me that he would still continue to consider me as a dear friend and that he would continue to give me his 99%. This struck me as condescending, a consolation prize that was more insulting than anything else. Despite the pain in my heart, I bravely replied that I would go on loving him, even though at that time I did not know how I would manage. When I reached home that evening, I went into my bedroom and cried my eyes out as I endured, for the first time, the agony of a broken heart. Luckily, I had one friend at that time with whom I was able to open up and share the pain of this heartbreak caused by James. In the process, I also disclosed to that friend my secret fear that I might be gay, the first time I ever found the courage to disclose myself to another person. Yet, despite this momentous first step, my friend, I guess, did not know what to do with such information, and we never discussed the matter again. But this one friendship was the most important one, which helped me to try to get over James. There was also our class play, of which I was director, which demanded my full attention, and the annual class play festival served as a kind of recovery therapy for me. We won second place. But what really helped me to recover from the whole James episode was my new attitude of recognizing Jesus as the best friend I had been looking for all this time. Both Siebel and the Days tried to teach us this message, that Jesus was our friend, our best friend, who had given his life for us. No human being could ever love us the way God loves us. Only God's love is truly unconditional. Can a woman forget the baby at her breast and have no compassion on the child of her womb? Though she may forget, I will not forget you. See, I have written your name upon the palm of my hands. Isaiah chapter 49, verses 15 to 16. Jesus as my best friend was a religious image that sustained me for many years. This was a common image propagated by Catholic schools in the Philippines to encourage young people to open up their hearts to God, to inspire them to pray regularly and commune daily with their best friend. It was an image that I embraced wholeheartedly because I could not open up to a human friend about the secret within my soul. It was God, and only God, to whom I could fully open up, who could fully and completely understand me. After James, I felt that it was better for me to hope in the Lord rather than in the imperfect love of any man or woman.